Major funding for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant HEALTH, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Recently, an unnamed economist nailed it when he responded to the current string of modest growth in business indicators. He said, "No surprises, it's more of the same. We're in recovery. It's just slow." I'm Chris William, and welcome to the most broadly watched program on Carolina business and public policy. Maybe the theme for the last 3 years in this economy should be unremarkable and predictable. And this may not be so bad when you start to drill down into specific sectors, though, like technology. You begin to see more activity and, frankly, more excitement. That is a good place for us to start in this dialogue. And later on, Red Hat CEO Jim Whitehurst.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded May 11th, 2012. On this week's program, Dr. Deng of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, Ernest Andrade of the Charleston Digital Corridor, and special guest Jim Whitehurst, President and CEO of Red Hat. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Ernest, welcome. Good to have you both here.
Thank you for having us.
Glad you came.
Good to be here.
Ernest, I think it's been maybe 4 years, so we're glad we finally talked you to come back up here and join us on the program. And I'm going to start with you, Ernest. Let's talk with a technology question. I mean, you know a little bit about technology, and not just in the corridor, that digital corridor down at Charleston in the Lowcountry, but, we all carry these smartphones now. We all have this technology on our hip that's pretty stinking amazing. And, the volume of not just apps, but the volume of information. And you've got servers like, or you've got services like Verizon, you've got AT&T, you've got Sprint, and you've got these folks that have to invest huge amounts of capital just to keep the infrastructure providing all the technology. I mean, at what point does this become a unsustainable growth? Do you get the sense that there's another bubble that's going on in technology here?
Not at all. I think if you look at what's happened over the last since the recession started, I guess in the late '80s, or I'm sorry, this time around in 2008, the technology sector has continued. It has been the one sector that has continued to climb. What we have seen is huge expansion. This has been it's not been a slow growth. It's been a fast growth approach in Charleston's economy. Companies, in our last survey in 2011, 88% of the companies had hired, 38% of the companies had doubled in size, and the investments in technology continue. And the limiting factor, and that we probably will talk about, is talent. Mm-hmm. It's talent that's going to drive these companies moving forward.
Yeah, the workforce development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we will get back to that. Let me go to you on this. I had a physics professor that once told me that the bulb that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and I'm sure you've heard some variation on that. So when we've got a technology sector that's so hot, and let's just use the knowledge economy sector. When we've got a technology sector, a knowledge economy sector that is booming and so hot and looking for capital and looking for workers, does that create in itself a challenge for them to continue that momentum, whether they can find capital, whether they can find the intellectual property, the intellectual worker?
I agree with Ernest. I believe the biggest bottleneck we're going to face really is on the talent side. I think when we talk about technology, a interesting phenomenon we got to talk about. That is, what is technology and what is technology for, right? I think it's fair to say that today, every industry is an IT industry. It's not because every industry, every worker is using computers, but rather because technology has become the fundamental drivers for productivity, efficiency, but also for operations, for innovation. And that changed the name of the game. And in fact, I was just talking to someone the other day that it says that if you're counting the number of people working on technology, Bank of America will be one of the largest technology companies in the world. See, that speaks a volume.
Well, okay, well, let's go to the workforce development issue, because that seems to be at the core of a lot of this. Any business model we know, or most business models we know, the single largest cost is payroll. So when you have workforce development challenges, that affects the whole operating model of the business. Back to you, Ernest, on this issue of, and on this program more than once in the last few months, we've had Chamber of Commerce execs, we have CEOs, we've had business people say, the phenomenon right now is we've got an 8 or 9% unemployment rate, but yet we can't find the workers, so we're poaching qualified workers from each other. Isn't that unique, and how far does that go, and what challenge does that create?
I think the poaching of talent has been around since the beginning of time. And so it's not a phenomenon that just kind of came about. But the reality is the challenges that we face from a policy perspective and from an administrative perspective is to go beyond connecting talent with companies to developing talent. And in that regard, we have got to widen the talent pool to feed these industries, because it is very important. And in our case, we actually have companies that will grow as fast as they can get the talent. So the strategy that we are adopting is one to not just connect talent, so connect from Dr. Yi's program into Charleston, but we now have started an augmentative program called Code Camp, where we're actually starting to teach some of these technologies ourselves. I think it's definitely leading at a local level, where we actually have the companies who have volunteered staff to train employees who could potentially end up in their companies.
Is that, and we've got about a minute left before we bring our guest on. Yi, you're in the College of Informatics at UNC Charlotte, so you're going to have a different point of view. Do we need to be organically pushing these students through the education process that way, or is there some type of apprentice technical college, community college system that works in concert with what you're doing?
I think both. When we talk about talents, really there are two dimensions of issues. One is you need different levels of talents. You will need community college graduates. You will need undergraduates. You will need postgraduate talents. All of that, the need for every level has been increasing at a very far faster pace than the production, if you will, can keep up. Secondly, I think from a different dimension, the talent issue really is about, I think there are three principal issues. One is the number. The sheer number of production nationally or regionally we're talking about is far below the demand. So there is a big gap and a widening gap in terms of talent supply. Secondly is what kind of talent? Because the nature of technology has been changing as we talk about. So the kinds of people we're going to need now and we're going to need in the future are quite different than what we need in the past.
I get the sense we could probably drill into this. Let's bring our guest on. I'm sure he's going to have an opinion or two about this. Arguably, one of North Carolina's, and certainly the Triangle's fastest growing companies, has also been one of the hottest as measured by things like share price and revenue, to name a couple. When Red Hat's current CEO joined the company, the stock was around $20 a share, languishing to some degree and below that for some time. Now it's closer to $60 a share. The question is it going higher, and which way is up? Well, joining us now from his office, and I think it's fair to say, Jim, still on the Centennial campus at NC State, is the Open Source Software Developers Chief Executive, Jim Whitehurst. Are you still on the Centennial campus?
Yes, we are. We committed to staying here in Raleigh, so we've actually contracted to take an entire building downtown, but we'll also maintain a presence here on NC State's campus.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because that has been somewhat of a critical mass on NC State's campus for not just you, I know, as an alum, and I mean as a company as alum, but a lot more. Jim, you've heard kind of the dialogue that's going on here. When you look at, you know, here you are, a billion-dollar company. What a great success for you. Congratulations to you and your team. I know you're excited about that. But as you add team members and as you add the right team members, how do you do that when in a challenging environment, when you need the education, when you need the code writers, and when you need the folks that get it?
Well, it's extremely hard. I think we're creating a digital world of haves and have-nots, where people who are educated and can program can make huge amounts of money. And especially out in Silicon Valley, the war for talent is just extraordinary. And then obviously we all read the papers with the high unemployment rates that we need to address. You know, tactically for a company like Red Hat, we try to spread out around the country. So we certainly have a development center out in Silicon Valley for some very specialized skills where Stanford and some of the startups there offer a lot of that talent. But we also have a large development center in Boston. We have people spread out around the country. And then, of course, globally, we just expanded development centers in Pune and in Bangalore. Mm-hmm. So we've really had to spread that out. But more broadly, back to one of your earlier questions, we need PhDs in computer science. We need undergraduates in computer science. And just as importantly, we need the community college system to step up and provide the masses of people required to run all of these systems. So it's really across the board, there's a need for talent as we move from the industrial age to truly the information age.
Now, in a dialogue we had earlier on this program, not earlier in this program, but on another program, one of our guests made the point that Boeing was so successful in the low country, and I know you know this, Ernest, but Boeing was so successful in getting these 6,000 workers currently because they reached out to the technical college system in South Carolina. Do you get the sense that Scott Rawls and the North Carolina Community College system, have you had conversations with them about helping you flesh out the staff that you need?
Oh, absolutely. I was on the phone with Dr. Scott at Wake Tech earlier today. You know, it is so important that we build those skill sets that ultimately run just the masses of computers that'll be powering the economy. So, yeah, we're actively involved. And one of the great things about North Carolina is we have a phenomenal community college system. But yes, we're actively engaged in curriculum and how we can help support that to make sure that, you know, we're getting the pool of talent that's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Ernest, question?
Jim, you did something that I haven't heard before. You did very well. You just identified 3 tiers of employees that your company needs: the entry level, just the technical guy, then the guy who's the service technician who can actually interface with the customer, and then the high level PhD types, basically, who are actually creating new product that drives value in the company.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, it was really nice to hear that. Where are the largest needs? And obviously they can vary. So I think of Red Hat as being in the second and third tier, the PhDs and the college graduates. But you take somebody like Google, who's operating data centers, they could do with the community college guys, right? So where are your needs?
Well, for our needs, directly commercially for our business, are much more the PhDs and the graduates, because we're actually writing the software. But commercially for us, just as important is to make sure that our customers have a talent pool that can actually implement our software in the data centers. So, whether that's here locally, the state of North Carolina, or the large companies that are based here, or just broadly around the country and around the world, all of our software is being consumed in data centers, and those data centers need sysadmins, they need technicians to keep those up and powering those data centers. And so for us, we don't necessarily hire a lot of the technicians, but they're critical ultimately to our success, because if our customers can't effectively run the computers that they have, then obviously they're not going to be buying software.
Jim, follow that conversation. What do you see the kind of tech-savvy talent we need, not only at your company, but also broadly in our industries? What kind of people do you think you would like to see for the future?
Well, I think the interesting thing today is we're in, I would argue, a fundamental paradigm shift in computing. And I don't even want to use the cloud word, which is so overused in technology, but conceptually, we're going from a world where computers sat, under your desk or you carried a laptop to these huge data centers with computers in them, and then smartphones or thinner, smaller devices, right? And so every consumer who has a smartphone sees this phenomenon, right? In a paradigm shift like that, you certainly need people who are tech savvy, who can write the code to make those systems work. But just as important, you should need people who are entrepreneurial, who can envision what those systems should look like, right? Because there's not a good roadmap for this. As you get further into a paradigm, so the last 5 years of, what we call the fat client, or the big computer sitting under your desk or laptop, there's a pretty clear roadmap, and you needed really good engineers to continue to make small improvements. But we're in a world now that's so wide open on exactly how mobile develops, exactly how the Internet of Things, so your refrigerator being hooked to the Internet, and why and how and what, that we also need very entrepreneurial people. And so complementing those sets of skills, I think, is critical for not only for Red Hat, but in general from a public policy perspective for the U.S. in making sure that we win that war for talent, because it's truly a global war.
Jim, I want to come back to your term about cloud computing. I know it's a buzzword, and it certainly is within the industry, but as it becomes more pervasive and more well-known, it seems, on the iPhone, you talk to Siri, and Siri clearly is the connection between the cloud and your phone, and the magic that happens there is pretty amazing. But when the challenges to cloud computing are clearly safety, and not just safety, but hackers and those that want to break into these systems, and given enough money and given enough resources, they're going to break in. So I guess is cloud computing, I know nothing will ever be safe enough, but can cloud computing stay ahead of those who would love to bring it down?
I would actually turn that around and say, I feel much more confident that over time, Google will do a better job of encrypting your data and making sure they keep hackers out than you can do on your home computer. Right, what we're talking about is, yes, computing in general is growing, so there's more points of vulnerability. At the same time, allowing your data and information to be held by professionals who are, and have PhDs in computer security will probably do a better job than you can do in your laptop or sitting at home. And have you protected your wireless router enough? And do you have your hard drive encrypted with a hard enough password that if your computer got stolen, it couldn't be decrypted? Ultimately, sure, there are holes to be filled, but ultimately, I fully believe that having a few massive cloud providers that are storing and encrypting and protecting your data can do a much better job than millions of individuals who aren't as skilled in those areas. So we're in this transition period where you hear a lot when there's a hack into, Amazon or Microsoft, and you don't hear as much about the thousands of laptops that are stolen, which is a much, much, much bigger deal. And as your data moves back into the cloud, it will certainly be safer.
Good point. Ernest?
Well, I have to ask, switching gears on you, as Charleston's business development guy and focused on IT companies, it was widely reported about the incentives that the company got to locate to downtown Raleigh. I'd like to ask you, beyond incentives, what was important? If I were to ask you what were the top 3 reasons you chose Raleigh over the reported competitive states, the states competing, suddenly there was more to than incentives, and I'd like for you to address that.
Oh, certainly. Incentives clearly played a role, but the most important criteria were availability of talent and cost of doing business. Right? And, the incentives play a role, but those are a very short-term, very modest role in the overall cost of doing business. And so for us, can you get the qualified talent? That goes to the university system, the community college system, even the regular secondary educational system. It goes to quality of life. It goes to traffic, it goes to tax rates. All of those things kind of bundle together. And is this a place where skilled, educated people who have the capacity to live and work anywhere in the country, is this a place they want to be? And obviously, the Triangle area in North Carolina in general plays quite well there, right? Then secondly, whether it's the cost of utilities or the cost of real estate, just all the other kind of costs of doing business, the regulatory environment, all play a second role in that. And certainly incentives kind of help make those numbers work. But in general, if this wasn't a place where we could hire the people we want to hire, we wouldn't have stayed here. And so the good news is this is a phenomenal place to hire people and retain people. right? There is an incredible war going on in Silicon Valley for talent, and our attrition rates in our offices out there are significantly higher than here. The good news is once people get here, they love it here, and it's hard to get them to leave. So we also have much lower attrition here, which has been quite a benefit. And I think it's one of the competitive advantages that we have versus a lot of the companies that are based in Silicon Valley, and they assume the sun rises and falls right around Palo Alto.
That's good.
Dr. Deng.
Speaking of university, Jim, are you happy with the relationship between industry and university now? And what do you think the kind of partnership industry and university should have in this 21st century knowledge-based economy?
Well, to emphasize the last point you said, I think that is so important. We truly are moving from an industrial age to an information age. And I know we've said it for 50 years, but it's really happening now as more and more businesses, the means of production go from being physical assets to information assets. And obviously, university systems are both teachers of and producers of that intellectual property. I think the university system's done a reasonably good job of working with some of the large corporates here. The big hole that I see, and one I'll be the first to say the university system's working on, I've had multiple meetings with the major universities in the area, is how do we spawn entrepreneurship broadly? Right, so when I think about what Red Hat needs, we can certainly go and we can contract with NC State or UNC or Duke or the universities around here and talk about engineering relationships. But just as important to me is how do we build an entrepreneurial community where there are a lot of startups, there are a lot of new ideas happening, makes it a nice place to live, and increases the talent pool that we can pull from or Red Hat can go to. And so we've been working a lot on, with the universities, not we as Red Hat, but we as leaders in the community trying to build an entrepreneurial culture. How do we take the billions of dollars of research that are going on in the universities around the state and pair that up with entrepreneurs and venture capitalists to really build a thriving ecosystem of new startups? And I think the good news is I think the university system here recognizes that's important, and we're working on it. But I'd really call that a work in process.
And clearly, we've got a couple minutes left, Jim, and clearly the fact that you have so fleshed out the business on the Centennial campus with NC State is a clear vote in that way. I want to go, literally a couple minutes left, I want to go in this direction where we have arguably had one of the toughest economic times, at least generationally, for quite some time. When Red Hat does as well as it does, and you read the same headlines from a lot of the same papers that I do about state budgets and what goes on, and the safety net for social services and human services and kids and families. What renewed call do you feel as the chief executive of a culture that seems to care? What renewed call did you feel to reach out to some of the communities that not just you work in, but the communities around Red Hat to say, we want to make sure that maybe the United Way is not going to be able to fund you, but how can we help those who are less fortunate? How can you make sure they don't fall through the cracks?
Well, this is critical, and I'm a strong believer that you cannot be a leader in business without being a leader in the communities in which you live. And so we've had a renewed effort, significantly increasing our direct giving budgets, but just as importantly is building a culture of service where we strongly encourage all of our senior leaders to be involved in civic boards. And we don't push a particular direction because you need to be passionate about it, whether that's education, whether that's poverty, whether that's healthcare. But we really push our associates to get out there. When the downturn happened, we canceled our holiday parties, and we've never reinstituted them. We've taken all the money that we used to use for a nice big black tie event in downtown, and we now, every year, we vote and we give that to a charitable cause. In that case, it's always need-based, so it's around the holidays. We do needs-based. We collect food. We have an organization of elected people within Red Hat who determine how we give out dollars. So I think it's really, really, really important, especially as we look at Red Hat, and we talk about this a lot, that we've been so fortunate to be in the right place, at the right time, in this changing technology world. And so we've been incredibly successful, and we need to give some of that back. And I think the area is education, because we think that's so important to build the capital stock.
Jim, we're going to have to, I'm sorry, Jim, we're going to have to cut you off, but also thanks for the shot of the red fedora behind you off your left shoulder. Jim, good to see you, and congratulations on a great year so far.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Yi, good to see you. Ernest, welcome
you.
back.
Thank you.
Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.